Hello, my name is Robert M. Ross and I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Pennsylvania. And I'd like to welcome you back to my channel, which I'm calling The Common Sense Lifestyle. This is where we try to take some psychological terminology, psychological concepts, and break them down into things that you can use in your everyday life. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, but before we get into that, do need to explain something. I am not your therapist. Nothing in any of my videos should be interpreted as mental health treatment. These videos are for informational purposes only. If you are suffering from some psychological difficulties, the only thing that I can really tell you to do is seek out a therapist in your area. You can contact your insurance company, you can contact Psychology Today and use their Find a Therapist function, and you can find someone in your local area. So please do that if that's required of you. Title of today's video is a little bit different than other videos. Most of my videos are targeted towards a male audience, and it's about self-improvement and becoming the best version of you can be. Today is a little bit different. This video is for absolutely everyone. And the title of the video is To ADHD or To Not ADHD. And of course, ADHD, we mean Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Now, one thing is need to make clear. There's lots of people out there still using the term ADD or Attention Deficit Disorder. Technically, that has not been a diagnosis since the late 1980s. ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is the primary diagnosis at this time. To be more descriptive, there are three kind of flavors to ADHD. There's a different diagnosis for the children that are mostly inattentive type. In fact, that's the name of the diagnosis, ADHD, mostly inattentive type. These are the kids that would have been diagnosed in the 70s or 80s with ADD, and they're not really hyperactive and they're not particularly impulsive, but they have a whole lot of problems with attention span, not paying attention, daydreaming, things like that. Other flavors of ADHD are the hyperactive type or impulsive type and the combined type where all the symptoms are present. Now you can look these up for yourself. I don't want to belabor this too much. But here are some common symptoms of ADHD. In terms of the inattention, the inability to pay attention, folks tend to be disorganized. They'll lack focus. They'll have a hard time paying attention to details. They'll have a tendency to make careless mistakes. Their work might be messy and seem careless. They may have trouble staying on topic while talking, not listening to others, and not following social rules. And when we look at a kid with ADHD not following rules, it's a little bit different than someone intentionally being disobedient. Children with things like oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, things like that, they'll intentionally break rules. They'll break rules for the sake of breaking rules. A kid with ADHD will break rules because they're just not aware of what the rules are, or they have something that pops into their head and they just do it before they think it. In terms of getting back to inattention, they'll be forgetful about daily activities. They'll miss appointments, they'll forget to bring lunch, they'll lose their pencil, things like that. They can be easily distracted by trivial noises and events that are usually ignored by other people. In terms of hyperactivity, kids with hyperactivity may fidget and squirm when they're seated. They may get up and frequently walk or run around. They may run or climb a lot when it's not appropriate. Now, one thing that we have to differentiate, as kids get older, the gross hyperactivity appears to go away. It really just changes. A lot of teenagers with ADHD, they're not going to be running around the classroom. They're not going to be climbing on things. They're not going to be just going a million miles an hour. They may be very restless. They may have a very hard time slowing down, calming down. Getting back to hyperactivity, they have trouble playing quietly or doing quiet hobbies. They're loud, they're boisterous. They always seem to be on the go and they may talk excessively. In terms of impulsivity, basically impulsivity is you act before you think. They have a hard time waiting to talk or react. They have a hard time waiting for their turn. They'll blurt out the answer before the question's finished. They'll frequently interrupt or intrude on others. And this can happen so much that it actually causes problems in people's personal and professional lives. They may start conversations at inappropriate times because the idea comes into their head, and before you know it, they're spurting out that idea, and they're not even thinking about, is this the time and the place for that kind of a conversation? So we got through some of the symptoms of ADHD, but the bigger question is how do we diagnose ADHD? And this is where it gets really, really important. We diagnose ADHD, the traditional methodology to diagnosing ADHD, and it's been the same for a very long time, is you conduct an interview. You ask a whole bunch of questions. You take as comprehensive as a history as you can from pregnancy, delivery, early childhood milestones, anything. You just try to dig and find anything that could be causing the symptoms. You have the family fill out questionnaires, and there's 1,005 different questionnaires out there, so I'm not going to get into which ones. But there are a lot of questionnaires to fill out, and the reason you do this is you want to make sure if the child has symptoms of ADHD, you want to make sure they have those symptoms everywhere. One of the criteria for ADHD is the symptoms have to occur across different environments. So if little Johnny only has problems at home and he doesn't have problems at school and he's perfectly fine there, then your job is to kind of figure out why is he having problems in one place and not the other, and it's probably not going to be ADHD. You do an observation of the client, and of course, one of the things that you have to understand is we know that kids come into our offices and they act differently in our offices than they do anywhere else. It's a new environment, it's different. They may not act the same as they do everywhere else. We do understand that, so don't be put off by that. Then, in the end, if there's going to be medications discussed, if there's going to be additional diagnoses, additional services recommended, we're probably going to need to go and see, well, we're definitely going to need to go and see a psychiatrist at that point, and they can confer with the family, and they together can make a decision as to what they're going to do past that. Now, I just laid that out, that whole process, and it's a pretty comprehensive process. But one of the things that we know now through research is that even with being thorough, even with doing the questionnaires, even with doing the observations, there's a 34% overdiagnosis rate for ADHD. So to drill that down just a little bit further, just to kind of have you visualize this, if you had a room full of 10 kids, each diagnosed and treated for ADHD, according to the research, 3.5 of those kids don't actually have ADHD. They have another condition that are causing those symptoms, and that condition was missed in the diagnostic process. Now, there are other conditions we call mimics, things that can mimic the symptoms of ADHD and can make a child appear to have ADHD when they really have something else instead. So here's some of those conditions. Depression, especially in younger kids. Depressed children may not pay attention. They may be cranky and irritable. They may not. They may be a little bit hyperactive. They may just not care. But it'll appear that little Johnny's not paying attention. He's doing this, he's doing that. Oh, he has ADHD. Maybe not. Anxiety. Little kids that are nervous, or even adults that are nervous, have a hard time paying attention because they're nervous, they're worrying, they're thinking about bad things that are going to happen or have happened or things like that. Children that have been abused, they engage in something we call hypervigilance. If you get the you-know-what beat out of you every day at home or very frequently at home, you're always going to be looking for the next attack, and that may cause you to not pay attention to your schoolwork. Some children, it's rare, but it can happen. Children can start manifesting symptoms of bipolar disorder, which is definitely not ADHD. And then some children with autism, they'll have a hard time with attention span. They'll definitely have a hard time with social interaction, social cues, and things of that nature. And folks that have sensory processing problems. So that certainly can be an issue. Now, what do we do in that situation? We have 34% overdiagnosis rate. We have a lot of conditions that can look like ADHD, but really isn't ADHD. So what do? Well, that's where a new kind of test comes in, and the test is called NEBA, N-E-B-A, and there'll be a link in the description below to their website. NEBA is the very first, and only to my knowledge, FDA-approved test for ADHD. It uses an FDA-approved medical device to collect brainwave data, and it's EEG technology. If you've ever been in the hospital or one of your relatives have been in the hospital and they've had an EEG, it's the same kind of machinery, it's just tuned differently. It's set up differently to measure different things. It is completely safe and painless, and it is approved from children age 6 to just prior to the 18th birthday. Now, we can test adults with it, but it's considered to be quote-unquote off-label. The test takes about 10 to 20 minutes. The test is done locally. For example, I do it in my office, and the results come back from NEBA's headquarters in Georgia in about an hour. There is a charge to the test, got to tell you that, but that's something you pay the testing company for. You don't pay me. No money changes hands there. You pay the testing company. What we're also looking at is insurances currently don't pay for the test. But NEBA can send you a completed billing form that you can send to your insurance company and see if they'll reimburse that as a out-of-network test. Some insurances will do that, others will not. There's really no comprehensive list of which ones that will and which ones that won't. If you're interested in seeking out NEBA testing, you can contact NEBA, and again, the website will be listed below in the description. And they can connect you with a local provider in your area, or the closest provider in your area. One thing about NEBA that's kind of important is it doesn't replace the normal diagnostic process. So let's say you're in Northeast PA, you call my office and we schedule a visit to talk about NEBA. I'm going to do the same assessment that I would do with any kid. I'm going to go through and I'm going to ask all the questions. I'm going to take the comprehensive history. I'm going to have you fill out questionnaires. We're going to get those questionnaires back. I'm going to observe the kid. I'm going to collect your observations of the kid. And then we're going to sit and see, okay, is the test necessary here? And if we think the test is necessary, we'll schedule the test, different appointment, different day. We'll not bill your insurance for that visit, or you for that visit. You'll come in, we'll conduct the test. Within an hour, the results come back and we go over the test. So, question is going to come up, how accurate is NEBA? How does that help? Well, if you remember, we have a 34% overdiagnosis rate with ADHD. If we add the NEBA test to the standard process I already described, the overdiagnosis rate goes from 34% to 3%. So let's go back to that visualization I tried to give you before. If you had a room full of 10 kids, all diagnosed and treated for ADHD, 3.5 of those kids don't actually have ADHD. They have another condition that's causing them to have those symptoms. It's wrong. They're being treated incorrectly, and probably it can be destructive at times. You give the medication to the wrong kind of person, it's not going to do well for them, and it may actually cause more problems. Now, with NEBA, imagine you had a room full of 100 kids that are diagnosed and treated for ADHD. Out of that room of 100 kids after NEBA, only 3 would be overdiagnosed. Is it perfect? It's not perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than we have now. So why am I talking about ADHD and why am I talking about NEBA? And to be honest, and to have kind of a disclaimer here, I'm not being paid to do this video. NEBA didn't approach me to do this video. I'm doing this video of my own volition on my own time because I think it's important. And here's why I think it's important. I graduated with my master's degree in 1993 and ended up working in a little mental health clinic in another part of Pennsylvania. And it was right during what I refer to as the everyone has ADHD and let's give them all Ritalin phase that the country was going through. I was hearing horror stories at the time. Horror stories, parents coming and telling me that the school said my child can't go back to school until they're on medicine. And I didn't hear that from just one parent. I probably from dozens of parents. Not a very good thing, probably illegal, but this was 25 years ago, so hopefully things are better at this point. Dealt with a lot of people who were coming in from other places, other clinics, other providers, saying that they walked into the office and 15 minutes later they walked out with a prescription in their hand. And obviously the diagnostic process wasn't followed. They just listened to whatever the school said or whatever the parent said, and they just gave a prescription without actually taking a look at what was going on with the client. Now, fortunately for me, at this little mental health clinic I landed in, there were 2 doctors there that were absolutely fantastic in terms of they prescribed medications judiciously, but they weren't pill pushers. So if they were going to prescribe something, they wanted all the information possible, all the information available to make sure that they were making the correct diagnosis and they were providing the correct medication. So it was something that was a very educational experience for me, and I learned the process thoroughly. So it's something that I've always believed in. But even back then, we always said, I wish there was a test for this. That, having a test would make this so much easier, and it would have been absolutely true. But now in NEBA, we have that test because, as I discussed earlier, even though we follow the correct procedure, we're still wrong 34% of the time, and that's crazy. I would much rather risk being wrong 3% of the time than 34% of the time. So that's kind of where I'm at with NEBA. That's kind of why I have it, and that's why I push it. Okay, so what if the test is negative? What if little Johnny or little Sally, they come to my office and it looks like it's ADHD, they're hyperactive, they're not paying attention, they're impulsive, and we do the test and it's negative. Well, now there's different scales and different, measurements with that, and we'll discuss those when the results come in. But what we need to go then is we need to look at other diagnoses. Is there something else going on with this child that can be causing these symptoms? And again, it's still possible for the child to have ADHD. Again, there's a 3% error rate with the test. So there's still a chance they may have ADHD, albeit small, and it does happen. But basically, we go and we leave no stone unturned, and we try to figure out what's really going on with the child that are causing these symptoms. And, really, when you think about it in the end, if we're going to treat something, shouldn't we make sure the diagnosis is right so the treatment is right? So if you want extra certainty, if your child's having problems, or even if you're an adult and having problems and you've wondered your entire life, is this ADHD or not ADHD? Contact NEBA. Again, link is down in the description. They can find a local provider in your area. If you're in Northeast Pennsylvania, you can contact my office. My contact information will be available down in the description below. And, we can, you can have the test done and have a little bit extra certainty to make sure that you're being treated for right, or your child is being treated for the right thing. So folks, that's it for today. I hope the video was informative. Please hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell if you want to be notified when I have more videos coming out. This video was a little bit different, as I said, because it was for everyone. But next week, we're getting back to videos that are primarily for men. So we'll see you next week and have a great day.